everything that I would ask for would be fulfilled for me. If I asked God for something, He would answer me.
Okay.
It almost became like this challenge or this game that was being played. It was almost as if God was saying to me, you are not going to be more generous than me. I am the most generous. Don't think that because you did that, that now I will be stingy with you. On the contrary, just as you are, I will be that, and even tenfold.
Okay. Wow.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الأئمة والمهديين وسلم تسليما. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My dear sister and companion Tiffany.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear father.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me here.
God bless you. So there was a time period in which there was a pop culture phenomenon called The Secret. And it was based upon this book that was titled The Secret, that was written by certain individuals that were promoting the law of attraction as being the ultimate solution to all problems in life. And they sought to interview and also make DVDs and use the testimonials of rich and successful people to state that, yes, this is our secret. This is how we became rich and successful, through utilizing the law of attraction, an ancient law that was hidden within Gnostic sources and ancient texts and scriptures, and only the rich knew it. And they kept it as a hidden secret to themselves. But now the authors of the book are making it available for everybody in order that mankind, as a whole succeeds. All right. They were kind of breaking the monopoly on the secret and making it accessible to anybody and everybody.
Yes.
And millions and millions of copies of this book was sold. It was translated into tons of different languages. The DVDs were spread all over the globe. And many people began to buy into this notion that our reality is in our hands, and that we can create essentially a better reality for our own selves simply by meditating or thinking or envisioning or drawing on a vision board what it is that we are hoping to accomplish.
Yes.
And I think it's been, 20 years or so since the book's released. So it's been a long time, and we still find that the world is in exactly the same place that it was. Actually, it's probably in a worse place. So one can kind of judge now, on the success of the book and see whether or not it was really true or not true based on the results that we have today. And I think that it's pretty safe to say that although it is an attractive idea, right, and it draws upon certain principles of science and physics that might be true, but the fact remains that the implementation of this theoretical knowledge did not result in the success that it promised initially.
Yes, I guess that we can observe that for sure. I mean, I kind of blew my mind. It's been actually about 20 years, now that you mention it. And certainly, if we look at the world as a whole, the world, it has not solved the world's problems, for sure.
No, it hasn't solved the world's problems. The rich kept getting richer. The poor kept getting poorer. The middle class is disappearing. And it seems like the world is actually in a darker place than it was. There are more wars, there's more deaths, there's more chaos, there's more diseases. And so one can only attribute this to one of two things. Either we had millions of maniacal people that were envisioning very bad futures for the world and therefore they manifested it, or the secret simply doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so what I would like to discuss with you today, Tiffany, is the true secret. What I have found in the teachings of the prophets and the messengers and the vicegerents, the secret to true success and the secret to true richness and fulfillment and happiness.
Okay.
I had spent a long time, many years, reading into the words of the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam and trying to get my hands on every single manuscript that I could find in order to read their hadiths. I had read some narrations from the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam that basically stated that if a day goes by in which you do not learn something new, then that should be counted or seen as a day that has been totally wasted. There was no meaning in life during that day. And so every day that we're alive, we have to pursue knowledge, knowledge that can obviously improve the state of the world or improve ourselves. And from that point, I went forward trying to learn something new every day. And I know that the emphasis with Muhammad and the family of Muhammad of obtaining knowledge was so great that there are many narrations to the effect of that even if not, that we have to pursue knowledge even if it were in China. And obviously the distance between Arabia and where the Prophet and his companions were at the dawn of Islam and China, there's a great distance between them, especially when you're putting into consideration the technology of the age. And obviously it would be extremely difficult to pursue knowledge in China for an Arabian or a person of Arab descent that lived 1400 years ago. And so we are supposed to overcome all difficulties when it comes to knowledge. We should travel and be willing to die in the pursuit of knowledge. And that's exactly what I did. And I found that the words of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad echoed and confirmed all of the words of the previous prophets and messengers that were sent, and confirmed by the Gospels and by obviously the Torah and prophets and messengers of different cultures as well. And I found that all of them had this kind of common theme between them. And that is that there is this secret to obtaining success, a secret to obtaining whatever it is that you want to obtain. So whatever it is that you would want to obtain, the secret is is applicable to whatever it is that you are pursuing. If you are pursuing richness, the secret applies. If you're pursuing mercy, the secret applies. If you're pursuing love, the secret applies. And the secret was really quite simple, and that is that you should be however it is that you want God to be with you. So you become like a mirror first of that which you want reflected onto you.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, if you want to be rich then, and you recognized that God is the one who is the rich, Al-Ghani, right, is one of his names, and you wanted to be Ghaniyu Billah, you wanted to be rich through God or by God, then you had to reflect his actions that you hope to obtain for yourself with others.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. That's very interesting.
So if you want that your prayers be accepted and you're constantly asking God to give you what you want in life, then you also had to be the fulfiller of prayers for other creatures.
Yes.
And once you aligned yourself and you became that for other creatures, God would be that for you.
Wow.
In other words, it is a way of applying practically the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ when he says that God does not change what is with a people until they change what is with their own selves. And so I took this idea, I took this notion, and I decided to experiment with it. And I decided to apply it. And I made an oath and a covenant with God. I said to God, God, no matter who it is, no matter what it is that they are asking for, I promise you that I will fulfill their request. Okay?
Okay.
So long as I am capable of it. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obviously does not burden a soul with that which it cannot bear, meaning you're not obliged to do something if you don't have the resources or the ability to do so. But so long as you have the resources and the ability to do so, I promised that I would do so. And I would see it as an obligation upon myself to do so. And I would see that the person who is requesting from me something to be a vessel whereby God is testing me or God is giving me an opportunity to do something. And I also had found many narrations from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam that basically confirmed this idea. And it said that we should, there's one narration that said that we should never be upset when somebody asks us for something, because actually this is a blessing in disguise. Okay. And that if we don't fulfill the request of the person who asks, or we get upset about that, or we shun that, then God would move that blessing towards someone else. We also had, and I paid very close attention to this kind of theme that was woven into the traditions and into the biblical texts and stories of the prophets and the messengers, of God basically testing prophets and messengers. And this is also in the narrations. God would test the prophets and messengers by basically making them have a taste of their own medicine, or having them pass judgment on their own selves. Yeah. And so there were narrations in Islam of particular prophets that would constantly ask for mercy from God for their people. And God would be wanting to, or see fit that he punished these people. And the prophet would object to God's wisdom. And so God would revert to testing them with a very simple test. And he would send to them an individual who would usually be an angel that would be disguised as a human being. And the angel would pose a particular problem to him. And then once the prophet judged, God would essentially parallel or mirror that judgment on a larger scale with the people. And the prophet would have no room to object, because God is only now applying the very punishment that the prophet himself had decreed.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. It makes sense. So it requires a person to sort of acknowledge and be aware of God's justice system. God has this, great justice system of karma where you reap what you sow. And so the secret seems to be really tied to that concept.
Exactly. And we see an example of this actually in the Torah, in the story of David. And there was a particular incident where there was a man with 99 sheep, right? Yeah. And his neighbor had one sheep. Do you know this story?
Yeah. So the prophet Nathan, he came to David and he asked him to judge in this matter. So there was a man who had 99 sheep and a man who had one sheep. And the man who had 99 wanted to take the one from the other man. And David was very appalled at this, and he thought it was so terrible. But the wisdom behind this parable is that David had actually done the same thing with Bathsheba. He had taken the only wife of his neighbor, Uriah. So he was actually judging upon his own self in this story.
Exactly. So what do we draw from this? We draw from this that God punishes people based on and deals with people exactly how they are. How they are is how God deals with them. And this is perhaps one of the meanings behind the narration of know yourself and you shall know your Lord. And one of the meanings behind the narration that says, it's a hadith Qudsi in which God says, I am how my servant perceives me to be. Okay? So how the individual is how God is going to be with him, because God is just. And so he uses the same scales that the individual uses for others. So if you want to change the destiny and the scales and the position and the situation that you're in, you're going to have to backtrack and change first what is with your own self in order that you change everything else that is around you, right?
Wow. So the solution is within your own self.
The solution is within yourself. And we have a narration that says that Imam Ali alayhi salam said that you think that you are a small germ, but yet enfolded within you is the greater cosmos, okay? And that is also one of the phases of interpretation of this particular narration. And so going back to the story, I decided that I was going to take these wisdoms and apply it in my actual life. And so I would walk on the streets of Egypt, and I might have in my pocket, say, 50 Egyptian pounds. And I would encounter a beggar on the street. If the beggar asked for money, I would ensure that I paid the beggar and gave the beggar a portion or perhaps all of that which I had. It would be dependent upon the situation. If I was walking and I had to go to a particular destination and I absolutely needed the money that was with me, then I would give everything else above the need to the individual that had asked me. Or perhaps I would assess the situation. And if I found that the person asking me was in greater need, then I would not hesitate to give everything that I had. Essentially, I would be conscious of the fact that this person asking could be an angel, and I could be in a test at the very moment with God, and that God, based on this interaction between me and the individual, will deal with me in the same way. And what I found to be true is that after going forth and doing these things, everything that I would ask for would be fulfilled for me. If I asked God for something, he would answer me.
Okay.
It would be accepted. Yeah. And I would expect that it would be accepted as well. And God was always more generous with me. It almost became like this challenge or this game that was being played, right? And obviously God is above all games and God is above all descriptions and characteristics, but in order to allow the listeners to, or the viewers to understand what it is that I'm saying, it was almost as if God was saying to me, you are not going to be more generous than me. I am the most generous. Don't think that because you did that now I will be stingy with you. On the contrary, just as you are, I will be that, and even tenfold.
Okay. Wow.
Okay?
Okay.
And so I found that a secret all of a sudden was unlocked.
Yes.
And all of my needs were fulfilled. And it got to the point, Tiffany, I swear to you, by Allah, allazi la ilaha illa huwa, that I tell you the truth and the honest truth. It got to the point where if I would even imagine in my head or have a craving for whatever it may be, a chocolate, a donut, anything like this, it would automatically manifest itself without me even asking God for it.
Wow.
Just by wishing for it or craving it or having a desire for it, I would be shocked to find somebody walking through the room at that very moment or knocking at the door and saying, hey, would you like to have a chocolate, or I got you this donut, or whatever it is that I had wanted at the time.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So it just goes to show how powerful it is when you allow yourself to become like a vessel for God's generosity, then you find God's generosity showering down upon you as well, even more so.
Absolutely. And so we have shared today with our viewers a practical way that they can actually go out and they can test in the real world. And the effects that this will have on the world are actually more powerful than any effects that the so-called secret that they had written 20 years ago would have, because there's no positive effects for the world if a person just meditates and wants and envisions that riches come to them versus them proactively going out in the world and playing the role of God, being a vessel for God, being a pipeline whereby God's divine sustenance can flow to creation.
Yeah.
And you know what's more incredible is that there was this movie that also came out over 20 years ago. It was called Pay It Forward.
Yeah.
And I found also that the more that I would interact with the people that are around me in this way in which I would fulfill their needs without me bragging about it or talking about it. If you brag about it, all the blessings go away. So you never feel good about it. You never think to yourself, oh, I've done a great thing today, because you actually didn't do nothing. And that's another point that we'll get to maybe in a future episode. You have to just do it sincerely for the sake of God and consider that you're doing nothing, but God is the one who is doing all things. But once I began to do this with the people that were around me, I saw that they began to connect and see, wow, this man is blessed. This man has his needs fulfilled. This man God is using to fulfill other people's needs. And they made the connection. And they said, we think that because he's such a generous man and he does all of this goodness, God bless him, and he's always helping us, that God's always helping them. Yeah. And so they wanted to do the exact same thing, and they wanted to emulate, right? Yeah. And so I found that these people that I were helping, all of a sudden, they became encouraged to do the exact same thing through observation. Right? Yeah. Rather than being told as if they were being preached to from a pulpit or something like this, they now had a living example that they could imitate and emulate and see for themselves the results. And in fact, they did see for themselves the exact same results that I saw, and they became also blessed in their lives. And to this very day, people write me or they talk to me about what it is that how this secret had affected their life, even though at the time and before this episode, I never really referred to it as the secret, but we do so in this episode for the sake of making the point that we would like to make.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is, an incredible piece of knowledge that empowers people with a lot of, ability to enact change in their own selves. And the way you're describing how people had witnessed the blessing, where you were a vessel for God's, generosity and other attributes for other people, then people saw that blessing and they wanted to be like you, and they wanted to emulate that. This is a perfect description of the early community of believers, that you had around you. And this is something that I myself observed and was really affected by, because I never saw people like that who were embodying the attributes of God and his love and his generosity and his kindness.
But we had examples of that in the Bible, didn't we?
Yes, exactly. It reminded me as a former Christian of the early community of Christians who were living with Jesus. So I made that connection and I saw that parallel, and it all started with you.
God bless you, Tiffany. And so I find that this, although we gave the example with riches, I found that it was also true with other things, such as mercy. I found that throughout life, human beings need God to be merciful with them. And they need to have assurance, especially as they face trials and tribulations. They face the loss of loved ones, and they face the questions of, and the realization that they themselves are mortal human beings that one day will pass away. They become more and more in need of salvation, grace, forgiveness, mercy. And I found that if you took this concept and you applied it to these other things that you would need from God, that the result would be exactly the same. And so if I wanted that God forgive me for my shortcomings and my mistakes, then I have to also forgive everybody else for their shortcomings and their mistakes.
Okay.
And I found that this concept and this idea was validated actually in the narrations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, thus validating and verifying even further the concept behind this secret. I found narrations that basically stated that there were individuals that forgave people for doing really bad things for them. And then they pass away and they stand before God in judgment. And God speaks to them and he asks them and holds them to account for their sins. And then he basically forgives or wipes off their slate clean due to the fact that these individuals had wiped off the debt of other individuals. And we find that there is a story pertaining to Jesus, actually, which contains the similar kind of meaning behind it, or the similar kind of substance, in which he talks about a rich man who had another man who he had loaned money to. And this individual that he had loaned money to, it was a parable from Jesus. This individual that the rich man had loaned money to also loaned afterwards money to other individuals. And then when it came time to pay the debt, the rich man who had initially loaned the second man, when the second man didn't have the ability to pay back the loan, the rich man who loaned him would forgive his debt. But the second man, when he would loan others, he would not forgive their debt. And so when the first man saw how selfish, how stingy the second man was, he decided that he was not going to forgive his loans at all anymore.
Okay. Yeah.
And so he held them to account, and he repossessed all of his belongings, and he enslaved his wife and his children in the same way that he had done to the others. Mm. And in that is a kind of secret. It was Jesus's way of telling mankind that if you want to stand in front of the God who is in heavens up above and be free of all of your sins and all of your debt, that the secret to that is by also freeing the rest of God's creation from their debt towards you. If you forgave fully and completely, and were never angry of anyone, and never had anything in your heart, if you forgave all creatures for the wrongdoings that they did for you, it would be impossible for God to stand on the day of judgment and hold you to account for anything that you did, because that would essentially make you more forgiving than the Creator himself.
Wow.
And you have more of an ability and a greater heart that you forgave everybody, where God can't even forgive you. It would make you in more of a position that's deserving to be God than God himself. And obviously, A'udhu Billah, that would never happen.
Wow. Wow, so this is the secret to obtaining God's mercy. This is the secret to, one of the secrets to salvation, essentially. That's incredible.
Exactly. And so for that reason, I began to go forward and decide that I would never go to sleep at night while I had anything in my heart, and that I would go through life totally forgiving every human being that had wronged me for anything, whether they be a believer or they be a non-believer. I would extend my forgiveness to all creatures, and I would leave this world. I became resolved that I would have the resolve that, and I became determined that I would leave this world having nothing in my heart towards anybody. And that I would recognize or make the excuse for, just as Jesus and the prophets and the messengers taught us, right? That make 70 excuses for your brother. I decided that I was going to make 70,000 excuses, not just for my brother, but also for my enemies. And I would see all creatures and all human beings and the whole world in general as there being no real bad guys. There's no such thing as a bad guy. There are just creatures that have different percentages of light within them. More are overcome by darkness, and thus they make dark decisions. They make wrong decisions because they're clouded, because they're foggy, because they can't even see their hands in front of them. And so they perceive things in a different way. They're not seeing things as they really are.
Okay.
They are perceiving good people as bad people. Why? Because they themselves are bad people.
Okay.
They themselves have done a lot of bad. They themselves are acting bad. But their nature and their essence is good, right?
Yeah.
Because they have even a small bit of light within them. And so I decided that I would see it in that way and forgive all creatures, and do as was said in the Bible, that the one who said as he was hanging on the cross in his final moments, he said, "Forgive them, Father, for they do not know," that we must, all of us, do the exact same thing and forgive all of mankind, not just the believers.
Okay.
And in doing so, I could be assured that without a shadow of a doubt, when I pass, that God would extend his forgiveness and his mercy to me, because I became a vessel of his mercy to creation. And so if he decided to do that, then great. And if he didn't decide to do that, then there was nothing wrong in his decision. He is God and everything that he does is right. But I would know that without a shadow of a doubt, God is more merciful than me. So I would know that it would be an impossibility that I not be engulfed by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then I want to take this moment actually with you, Tiffany, to address all the people out there that have ever done anything wrong to me in my life, from the day that I was born up until today and onwards into the future. I want to tell all those people that I love them. I want to tell all those people that I forgive them. I want to tell all those people that they're not my enemy. I want to tell all those people that I understand that the motives behind their actions were justified in their own brains. They thought that they were doing the right thing. And perhaps many of them still think that they are doing the right thing. And I believe that one day the prophecy which Imam Ahmad al-Hassan gave me will be fulfilled. And that prophecy is that I will leave this world having been killed. And when that day comes, I want people to know also that my forgiveness is also extended to the person who kills me. I don't want them, any of these people, to be judged in front of God for any action that they take against me. I forgive them fully. That does not mean that I am encouraging an individual to not defend themselves or defend their families. I think that defense is necessary and it's an obligation, just as Krishna taught Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. At some point, and sometimes, the ethical thing to do is to fight back in order that you deflect the arrows that are coming towards you. You have to defend yourselves. You have to defend your religion. You have an obligation to defend your family members, but you don't go on the offensive after that and totally demolish the enemy if salvation can be obtained, right? Mm-hmm. And so that is the position that we have. But we believe that Muhammad and the family of Muhammad and the prophets and the messengers, and we believe that the right thing to do is that even if in battle the enemy is destroyed or obliterated, that enemy that you destroyed and obliterated by necessity, that your forgiveness should be extended to them. And I'm going to give you now an example of the validity of what it is that I am saying, and how God performs this ultimate act of forgiveness for creation. There are these narrations from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and one particular narration which is quite interesting, that says that on the day of judgment, that God's mercy will be rolled out to all of creation, and it would be so great that even the devil himself, even Iblis, will think that he will become engulfed by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So imagine the devil and all of the crimes and all of the sins that he had committed, and how many people he had destroyed, and how many murders he was responsible for, and how many evil acts he was responsible for. Think about how impure, how evil, how bad he had been.
Yeah.
Even him, on the day of judgment, will think that the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will engulf him. So what is it that he sees that causes him to come to this conclusion? He must really see a whole lot of really bad people that did bad things, people that were condemned to hell, entering into heaven as an act of mercy and grace from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, irrespective of their faith, right? Yeah. Or their positions in life, that he himself thinks that he's going to be saved. And I actually wrote in the Goal of the Wise how I had this dream one day, and I asked Imam Ahmad al-Hassan alayhi salam about it, and I had asked him some questions. And Imam Ahmad al-Hassan alayhi salam basically told me that what I saw in the dream was true, and that actually in the hereafter, even Satan himself is engulfed by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that the wrath of God upon Iblis is not everlasting. It's only up until a certain point. And that is the meaning of the verse in the Quran in which God says to Iblis, "And verily upon you is my curse until the day of recompense." And so we find here that God does not place Iblis under an everlasting curse, but rather he says that there's a curse upon you up until a particular point. Well, when you go back to the narrations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, and you see what is the meaning of this, when God says, وَإِنَّ عَلَيْكَ اللَّعْنَ إِلَى يَوْمِ الدِّينِ. What is Yawm al-Din? What is this day of religion, this day of recompense? What is this day? And you'll find that this day is the day of the Qiyamah, or the day of the Qiyam, or the day of the rise of the Qa'im, the judgment day which occurs on earth.
Okay.
And Imam Ahmad al-Hassan says that, yes, the punishment of Iblis is that he becomes dethroned, and he becomes humiliated, and he's killed at the hands and by the sword of the Qa'im. And that is when the curse is finally broken on Iblis. And after that, he obtains the mercy and the salvation from God Almighty.
It's a huge revelation. It's a huge revelation, and it just goes to show the incredible mercy of God. I mean, it's beyond our comprehension. Even the ultimate adversary, can obtain God's mercy and be enveloped by God's mercy. That's huge.
And that should tell us something about God's mercy, and that should tell us about our expectations of God and how we see God, and how we have to break this despicable cycle of seeing God as some sort of evil monster that takes joy in punishing his children. We have to hold tight to this idea and this notion and this hadith from the Ahl Bayt that says that God is more merciful with his creatures than a mother is with her own children. There is no mother that I know that would take her children for behaving badly and throw them into a burning furnace or a burning oven. Have you ever heard of such a thing?
No, absolutely not. It just goes to show how I think people are reflecting their idea of God, which is this harsh judge, right? But actually, the true God is the merciful. So if we're able to be vessels of God's mercy with one another, like what a change we would see in the world.
Absolutely. And so God is just. He has to be just. He knows the hearts of mankind, and he knows the hearts of his creatures, and he must give back to each person that which he is owed. And people will face punishment. They will face humiliation. They will face judgment. But it is in the end of it all, is what I'm saying. In the end of it all, God's mercy will and shall overcome his wrath. And there's even a narration from Muhammad and the family of Muhammad that states that when the Prophet Muhammad went on his night journey and he met Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there was only between him and the Prophet this green veil, he hears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, "Verily, my mercy has overcome my wrath." And so we have to believe in that. We have to recognize that that is true. And we got to work together to put out the flames of hellfire and to correct the understanding of human beings. And we got to stop telling each other that you're a non-believer. And we got to stop hating one another. And we got to stop judging one another. And we got to learn to be, vessels of mercy. And it's by being vessels of mercy that we will obtain the ultimate mercy of God. But we got to give out mercy unconditionally. We got to help mankind unconditionally. We got to be walking, talking, breathing, living avatars of the divine characteristics and attributes and things that we hope to obtain from God. We have to be as we want God to be with us. If we manage to do that, then we will have implemented the secret and utilized it to its full extent. And I challenge everybody to test what it is that I'm saying and to come back to this video and write in the comments your experiences and share with people through videos the message behind this video, and share your experiences and teach other people how to be like God. And in doing so, we can change the world.
Thank you so much, Father.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Wow, what an incredible and beautiful episode. This is just such an important secret that we now know. I mean, the way that we are with others is the way that God is with us. So if we are kind to others, God will be kind to us. If we are generous to others, God will be generous to us. And if we are forgiving with others and merciful, then we will see God's mercy. But if we are not kind to others, then God will not be kind to us. If we are not forgiving with others, then God will not be merciful with us. Now, let's put this secret into action. Let's put it to the test, and let's change the world together.